I did not originally intend on making this video sound this harsh, but over time I realized two things. First and foremost, Throne has its sitting side firmly placed over the fire, and no amount of cotton candy-wrapped pleasantries from me is going to prolong its lifespan. Might as well just be honest. And secondly, I'm a cunt and I'm proud of it. But let's start over from the beginning, shall we? Before TNL originally launched, I was already a dedicated Guild Wars 2 player for several years, and that's specifically why Throne piqued my interest. TNL is on surface extremely similar to Guild Wars 2. Both games are MMOs with small-scale and large-scale PvP at the core of their endgame experience, both utilize a compromise between tap targeting and action combat, and both are NCSoft-owned IPs. Meaning that if Throne doesn't do well, NCSoft takes an L, and by a proxy, so does Guild Wars 2, as if NCSoft keeps taking Ls, eventually it will affect Guild Wars 2 as well. And so, understandably, I have invested interest in Throne and Liberty succeeding. Remember that little detail and come back to it every time you think I'm too harsh in my critique. I was somewhat excited to welcome Throne into my life. Unfortunately, Throne wasn't excited to welcome me. I gave Throne sufficient benefit of the doubt on its original release, but at the time I couldn't justify sticking with the game. It doesn't take 1,000 hours of looking at a dumpster fire to realize that it indeed is burning, and so I haven't wasted my time. But the game devs did, and so the game got a free update. With Winds of Talandre, the game's combat, weapon mastery, and several other systems were significantly revamped, which was enough for me to revisit Throne and ask myself whether or not the fire was at least put down. And here's where my problem lies. Throne, at almost every step of the player journey, sets itself up for comparison with Guild Wars 2. And also, what's the more evident the more time I spend with Throne, it loses that comparison in every single bloody facet imaginable that isn't just UE5 graphics. Both games use the same basic blueprint for combat, but Guild Wars 2 has more leeway and freedom built into their systems, so combat feels more free-flowing and less restrictive. Both games provide a variety of weapons and playstyles to choose from, but Guild Wars 2 doesn't require the player to grind upgrade materials every time they wish to switch builds or gear. Both games have small and large-scale PvP in similar environments as the core of their endgame. However, Guild Wars 2 doesn't do so at the expense of their PvE content and isn't egregiously pay to win. Both games face the same problems, like for example CC being overpowered, but Guild Wars 2 already has solutions for those problems that Throne could have easily copied, but just didn't. Both games tempt you with fashion, hoping you'll give in and spend, but one lets you buy premium currency with in-game gold so you can farm yourself a free skin or a discount, and other doesn't even let you use the fucking trading post without someone somewhere bending over with their wallet in their hand. Comparing these two games feels like watching two playthroughs of a linear RPG side by side, where on one side player takes every righteous option and on the other side every evil one. And if you think that comparing Throne to a decade-old Guild Wars 2 is unfair, both of these games exist in the same time frame in the state they currently are. If a player decides which game he wants to play, the choice is between current-day Throne and current-day Guild Wars 2, because time travel wasn't invented yet. And in that comparison, the only reason someone would choose Throne is if they don't even know Guild Wars 2 exists. And there's a book worth of examples to why, starting from the most important shit. Combat. The main way you're going to interact with world around you, because every PvP MMO is mentally set in Balkans. Throne was originally made as an idle autoplay mobile-esque horseshit, and unfortunately, legacy problems from that were not fully gotten rid of, neither between the first preview and release, nor between release and Talandry update, which generally drags PvP down with it. An interesting relic of that design are Stellarite, a resource that is spent as you attack, which boosts your damage with every attack that uses it, and Amitoi, an annoying punchable little piece of shit that keeps putting speech bubbles on my screen and in combat uses another consumable resource, World 3 Leaves, to heal you over time. Yes, both of these shits work in PvP, so we have to farm or buy these garbage resources not to be weaker than other players around you. The game is balanced around you constantly using consumable resources as basis of your damage and sustain. There's many quirks like this in Throne combat, starting with the fact that you cannot cast majority of your skills out of range from the target, including fucking gap closers, or that retargeting in this game physically doesn't work. Not to mention, tab targeting itself doesn't work by default in this tab target MMO, and ending on the fact that every skill has a percentage chance to hit or miss and to apply or not apply their CC or other effects, because consistency is a foreign word to NCSoft. As you may have guessed, also being published in West by the guys who did New World's flawless netcode isn't a boon either. Guild Wars 2 doesn't have these problems, as it was, from the very ground up, designed as an action-oriented game, and by developers who could tell apart their left hand from a rabid coyote. Guild Wars 2's systems are specifically designed to give you leeway and freedom in combat, and to not get in your way, to the point where targeting works like an aim assist, not your typical targeting, which is very convenient in clutching 2v1 scenarios. Meanwhile, Throne systems restrict your gameplay and get in your way pretty much all the time, as they are more worried about shoving microtransaction opportunities in your face than giving you a proper entertainment. And it bears repeating, I am not saying any of this because I'm rooting against Throne. There are aspects of it that were very good, like for example the purple attacks and the global parry mechanic, which with a little bit of clever thinking led to pretty interesting boss design for this game. I will gladly admit I enjoyed boss fights in this game, both the story bosses, solo dungeons, and in the case I was actually allowed to fight the boss, not just watch as some overgeared whale solos the boss before first mechanic starts, I also enjoyed co-op dungeon boss fights. Unfortunately, the same parry system that makes PvE feel fun doesn't really work in PvP, as to have solid chance at parrying anything when stuns are this fast and camera is this zoomed out, you have to have cheats installed. It is odd that the best designed part of this PvP MMO are the PvE encounters, while everything surrounding PvP itself is at best mishandled, but hey, these are the devs who couldn't figure out tab targeting. Speaking of suffering in PvP, let's take a look at my experience as a newcoming player. I boot up the game, reach the new level cap after Talandry update, checked how I get gear and realize that I'm fucked. The only places to acquire gear I need to compete with already geared players are all either PvP zones or drop from world bosses. Drops from which are dictated by a DPS race between you and everyone else hitting the boss, so that players with better gear than you can cock-block you from acquiring the gear you need to compete with them, even in peace zones. And if I decide I'm stupid enough to try and tackle Nebula Island, what's end up happening is that I have to continuously run away from some dipshit that I cannot defeat and try and do PvE on the side. That's not TNL, that's Dead by Daylight. I don't want to play Dead by Daylight, and if I'd ever felt the urge to do so, I'd just fucking kill myself. New player experience in Throne is fine-tuned to maximize misery. Unless you are already geared, you are continuously denied access to the resources you need to compete with geared players, either because of the DPS race on peace bosses
or because you can't compete with them for farm in PvP zones. The choice for a newcomer in Throne is between suffering, swiping the credit card, or quitting the game. And guess which one is the most likely outcome? Throne is going to die. It is perfectly tailored to make every new or undergeared player turn back and leave. And MMO without influx of new players is bound to wither until devs no longer consider its continued existence profitable and pull the plug. And you know what's the best about Throne? That it does the same shit even to the top dogs. You see, Throne's large-scale content consists mostly from castle siege, alliance fights or guild boss portals, where guilds fight one-on-one to compete over an objective. As you may have realized, having guilds fight one-on-one in a game that's already pay to win and already gatekeeps gear from under-equipped players only means that whichever guild is stronger just farms the weaker one until the weaker guild realizes they're fucked, leaves, and never comes back. Throne is perfectly tailored to speedrun its own demise, by making everyone except the top alliance on the server have horrible time with the game and quit. On the opposite side of the coin, Guild Wars 2 does its bloody best to ensure no one is incapable of competing. In instanced PvP, the much more elaborate equivalent of Throne's arena, with multiple maps and game modes, your gear doesn't affect your stats, and instead you choose stat presets, runes, relics and sigils from a pop-up menu, so that your level 2 character with rusty sword and shield and no runes or sigils can fight on equal footing with barons of the arena. Sure, you'll still get more than few involuntary prostate exams with a sharp object before you get accustomed to the pace and style of the game, because this game is very skill dependent. But you will never be gated from victory by anything else than just your own skill and knowledge. Of course, Guild Wars 2, in addition to that, also has a PvP game mode where your gear matters. It is called World vs World and is where all the mass-scale PvP happens, with massive battles, castle and keep sieges, and sabotaging enemy supply lines, because why not? World vs World is meant to give the open-world PvP experience without doing so at the expense of 5-year-olds and single fathers chilling in PvE zones. And here, if you come in as level 2 in starter gear, you'll obviously get completely shafted. However, this game is not interested in wasting your time with tedious bullshit like farming dwarves for 100 hours. You get gear in Guild Wars 2 fast and easy, and if you don't want to do so through PvE, that PvP game mode which equalizes your stats we just talked about also gives you a lot of cash and a lot of items, so you can get geared for World v World in PvP. Furthermore, World vs World avoids complete one-sided stomp matches by making entire mode 1v1v1, not one guild versus guild versus guild, but one alliance versus alliance versus alliance. That's up to 500 versus 500 versus 500 individual players. And before the word alliance triggers your PTSD, dear Throne and Liberty victim, those alliances are not player-made, but automatically assigned out of multiple stronger and weaker guilds, as automated matchmaking tries to make all three sides as closely matched as possible. Sure, the matchmaking isn't perfect, but it's leagues ahead of how Throne handles its guild versus guild content. After combat shenanigans, the second most important thing is how both games handle player builds. Throne parades around with the classless MMO label that is frequently used to hide lack of gameplay variety when devs didn't do their fucking job, of which Launch Day New World is a grand example. Fortunately, Throne did more than enough work to stand on solid ground in this regard, giving each weapon 12 skills, all of which can have their properties at least slightly altered, and by giving each player 2 weapons, that's 24 skills to choose from, the problem was avoided. That means Throne gives you 12 skills freely chosen from package of 24, not counting passives and consumables, while Guild Wars 2 gives you on average 10 weapon skills based on your weapon choices. However, weapon skills for each class in Guild Wars 2 are only a fraction of their overall toolkit, and because of how weapon swap system is implemented in this game, your weapon skills don't compete with each other for space on your skill bar, leaving place for class unique utility skills. That said, every weapon skill in Guild Wars 2 is also unique for each class, meaning a warrior, guardian, revenant, ranger, mesmer and necromancer can all wield the same greatsword, but every single one of them will have completely unique moveset with said same greatsword. Furthermore, every class in Guild Wars 2 gets unique class mechanic, and with exception of Revenant, choice of 1 heal skill, 3 utility skills and 1 elite skill out of total 55 class unique skills. With that comparison, the conclusion that Guild Wars 2 gives you more skill choice seems apparent, but that doesn't yet make its implementation superior. What makes Guild Wars 2 implementation superior is the fact that in Throne every skill needs to be leveled up with use of in-game resource, skill books, which aren't given to player in sufficient quantity within MSQ and therefore have to be either farmed, crafted or bought to make each individual skill function at its maximum potential. The same applies to gear, weapon mastery and other systems. All of those systems are gated behind doing random bullshit chores or grinding for 2 to 3 business decades. I already have boring house chores to slog through on daily basis. I do not want my entertainment to be in equal amount consisting of boring chores I need to do every day for a bloody century before the game kindly allows me to have a cramp of fun. This is why I love that Guild Wars 2 does none of that shit. You unlock every skill, every trait and every item you get immediately at its maximum power, so you aren't gated from better content by your gear or skill levels. This also affects changing your build if you get bored of the previous one. In Guild Wars 2, you just have to have the weapons and skills unlocked. In Throne, you have to have that, and on top of that, transfer weapon level, transfer skill levels, transfer weapon mastery level. Level transfer mats cost real money, by the way. Redo your runes, redo unlocking and upgrading your weapon traits, and that's all on top of getting the gear in the first place, which is comically tedious more often than not. Not to mention, your equipped items in Throne still take up space in your inventory, which is a design choice so archaic and so antithetical to concept of having multiple build templates that it's almost more funny than disappointing. Almost. Now, let's look at secondary core systems like Throne's passive skills and weapon mastery and their equivalent in Guild Wars 2, specializations. Once again, you don't have to level your specializations in Guild Wars 2. You just have to unlock them by getting hero points or through leveling. Guild Wars 2's trait system is built around the idea of synergies and interactions between traits within your equipped specializations. Like for example, like specialization in tactics, trait that immobilizes targets when you cripple with your skills, activates opportunist in arms, trait that grants you class resource and 25% crit chance buff whenever you immobilize a foe. What does Throne offer in comparison? 0.2% stat increase nodes, with few nodes that make your passives give more of one stat and less of another sprinkled throughout, making only the aforementioned passives even borderline interesting. Sure, Throne has skill modifiers attached to boss weapons, for example, which are interesting in their own regard, but they are at best equal to Guild Wars 2's traits and relics, whilst being much less commonly available. Compare for example Blazing Tornado on Celestial Cyclone Greatsword that makes your devastating tornado spin faster to Magebane Tether, a trait in Guild Wars 2 which lets you attach a chain to an enemy, making them unable to stealth, take more damage from you, and pulling them to you if they step out of its range. Or compare Judgment Wave on Immortal Titanic Quakeblade that makes your Gaia Crash shorter range but hitting multiple times, to King of Fires, trait that makes you trigger an explosion around you every time you use a basic skill while having Fire Aura. Those boss unique skill modifiers are very closely reminiscent of Guild Wars 2's Grandmaster traits, meaning endgame chase item in Throne alters your gameplay to the same extent as basic choice of trait does in Guild Wars 2. Be your own judge to what's more interesting. That said, Guild Wars 2 is not all sunshine and rainbows. You see, Guild Wars 2 launched originally as a buy-to-play MMO, and only made its base game free-to-play with launch of its first expansion, Heart of Thorns. Expansions in Guild Wars 2 remain up until today a buy-to-play content, which some consider to be a form of pay-to-win, as elite specializations and their signature weapons are gated behind purchase of those expansions. That said, those expansions aren't merely PvP content, but legit expansions with their own story, their own zones, bosses, chock full of earnable cosmetics and other content, all in the same price Thrones sells you skins for. Not to mention, elite specializations and their signature weapons are meant to be side grades to core classes and weapons. That, with combination with the fact that buy-to-play model of Guild Wars 2 means no monthly sub, no battle passes, no FOMO and no player power in cash shop, no season pass, no fucking premium tent, go fuck yourself BDO, you wasted years of my life, you rectangular whore. I'm more than inclined to believe that anyone who ever played an MMO already let worse shit slide without so much as giving it a second thought. And knowing full well that Throne's entire action house operates entirely off of a premium currency, makes it clear and abundant what's the underlying difference between Throne and Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 is published by NCSoft, that's true, but it is not developed by NCSoft. It's developed by ArenaNet, a AA studio, a little smaller than Arrowhead, creators of Helldivers 2. Guild Wars 2 is developed by people who made their game because they love and understand the genre, not because they want to empty your pockets to please shareholders. I didn't want Throne to be bad, and I don't want to accept the fact that it's bad. I think that Throne could have been a great PvE-focused MMO if they were allowed to focus on PvE. I think that was their original intention, until Suits Up Above made executive decision to turn this PvE passion project into idle PvP game because that's easier to monetize. And that's how it got stuck for 8 years in development hell and how we got the game we did. But I cannot just keep my eyes wide shut and lie to myself that with deep fundamental issues this game faces and the continuous barrage of bugs and exploits this game faces, with someone royally fucking up patches in the West, that with all of this, Throne is going to survive till next expansion after Talandry, and that my time doing chores in Throne is spent better than having fun in Guild Wars 2. And yes, I do realize that I sound like Guild Wars 2 shill right now, despite having over 100 videos already made pointing out flaws in Guild Wars 2. But if the most dissatisfied player in a community states that their game is better, there are only two possible outcomes. Either that player is delusional or correct, and there is no other way for you to discern if that game is indeed better other than just trying it by yourself. If you played Throne for any extended period of time and haven't felt the urge to cosplay Bloody Baron, give Guild Wars 2 a chance instead. In best possible scenario, you'll find an MMO that delivers high quality PvP and PvE experience, respects your time and your wallet, made by people who see you as more than just a dollar sign on a spreadsheet. In worst scenario, it'll still be cheaper than playing Throne, because you won't have to pay for therapy caused by stressing over all the bullshit this game pulls out of its ass just to make your experience worse for no discernible reason, and you'll at least be reassured that you knew already what was right for you all along. Either way, if you have further questions, requests, comments or delusions regarding this video, You can find the comment section in its usual place. If you want to stick around, subscribe, like or dislike, you know where the corresponding buttons are, and everything else is in the description. And last but not least, a big sign of gratitude towards all the generous supporters, continuously considering my dubious quality content worth their money. You're all truly welcome. Crabface out.